problems. I mean, on the one hand, many local papers do not have big budgets, but on the other hand, they may have occasional outlets on, for reviews and that kind of thing. Gilly's just saying that some publications don't use freelancers at all, and absolutely smaller local papers, weekly papers, which are very news orientated and don't carry features, are unlikely to have rich pickings. Sort of for you in that way. But on the other hand, I'm always surprised by there will be a lot of publications around, some of which you just don't see, that might be worth a phone call. There's a lot of trade publications, so if you've got an expertise perhaps that it tends to be easier, obviously, if you've got knowledge in a particular area, whether that happens to be sort of legal or accountancy or financial knowledge, and so on. Catherine's just sort of saying, she's emailed a few articles off, and I think the danger is you can have a sort of scattergun approach, and just sit there sort of hoping that the more you've sent off, the more chance you've got. But of course, if there is any problem with the fundamentals, then that's really not achieving anything. So, I mean, Gilly's sort of saying a friend did well with horse articles. I've mentioned, I think, before in here that I've been surprised by the distance learning side of things, the rich sort of range of options that have been. We've had a sort of former policeman who's gone on to become a sort of the crime reporter on the local paper. I had some years ago a farmer's wife in South Africa who realised that there was a big gap in the market in the farming press for anything geared towards women, who made up pretty much sort of quite a big percentage of the people receiving those farming publications. And she set out to provide something that women would really want to read in a paper that was very much dominated by agricultural matters. And I think you could probably see even from this distance how that angle that she was proposing, very simple and straightforward, but coming from a competent writer, would be quite appealing to an editor. You could see an editor thinking, oh my God, there's 30% of my readers that we're not even trying to reach. Why don't we have more for women in the dairy sort of industry there, who are on farms and want to perhaps read something that's not directly related to the business and so on. So I think there's so much trial. I'm sorry to sound as if I'm encouraging you just to sort of go off on one and try things for yourself. But the answer to many of the questions you have been asking is that sometimes, yes, there is no rule. So, for example, do free sheets use freelancers? Some do, some don't. Do locals use freelancers? Yep, some do, some don't. You can often tell by looking at a paper whether or not it's produced by sort of two men and a dog and has no freelance budget. I mean, obviously, signs to watch for in a local paper are the features pages? Are there a range of different bylines? Do they have sort of arts and lots of reviews and different types of features of that kind? And once you start seeing those kind of publications, then perhaps there's more of a chance. But again, it would still make sense to perhaps phone up and ask, bearing in mind that the worst that can happen, perhaps, is that they're not helpful. But I think so often you haven't actually lost anything. But I do think that we're sometimes too scared or worried about rejection to actually ask the questions in the first place. I've just been reminded by Lynham to go back and answer a question of Claire's about publications having a glut of articles which they stash to use as a filler on a slow day. They can do, and certainly, I mean, not usually. I don't know about a glut, but certainly as a features editor, I mean, I think the worst nightmare for any commissioning editor is a surprise. You know, that you've got suddenly pages to fill and you haven't got anything to put on them. So in the same way that a news editor will always have a sort of emergency story up and run if this doesn't work out, a feature writer, a features editor is going to hang on to possibles that they perhaps don't think are great but might use if there's an emergency sort of thing. But of course, that's not really the best. You don't really want to be just that he might use it if nothing better comes along, sort of thing. I think if you've got a strong idea, it makes sense to look. You know, I mean, first of all, look and see we'll have to wrap up fairly soon. I'm just looking at the time here, and sort of getting warnings on that. So we'll take final questions and try to address a couple of the key things that you mentioned earlier.